Hi folks, HR Funk here. Recently I received a comment on one of my videos and it touched on a topic that I've addressed multiple times here on the channel over the last 13 years or so that I've been producing these videos. But it strikes me that it might be a topic that bears discussion periodically because there are constantly new shooters developing an interest in firearms, and they might not go back 3 years or 5 years or more into the past in videos to see what some of us who have been around a little bit longer have discussed all those years ago. Specifically, the topic was the use of older firearms for defensive purposes and whether or not they are really inferior to a lot of the newest, latest, and greatest things that are being churned out by firearms manufacturers these days. Now, I will be the first to admit that a lot of the bells and whistles we see coming out on the latest and greatest firearms have more to do with keeping firearms manufacturers in business than they necessarily do providing a better tool for those of us who might find ourselves in a dire circumstance to use for defensive purposes. But it's probably also not intellectually honest to say that none of the engineering advancements that have come along in the last 2 or 3 decades really have not improved firearms, just like they've improved virtually anything else we've used, from washing machines to automobiles to computers to airplanes, etc. So in light of that comment, I thought that I might resurrect a series that I was producing a couple of years ago that was the new versus old series. Now, when I was producing that series before, typically I was comparing a newer firearm and an older firearm from the same manufacturer, like a new Smith & Wesson M&P versus an older Smith & Wesson Model 59, and comparing the performance of the newer firearm against the older firearm to see just how far, or if, there had been any advancements in the performance of those firearms over the various years. This time around, though, I thought I might change it a bit, and instead of comparing firearms from the same manufacturer, I thought maybe I would compare firearms from the same genre, being defensive handguns or defensive shotguns or what have you, with an older design competing against a newer design. Now, as I said a moment ago, I've done this type of thing a lot in the past. When I was producing my Law Enforcement Qualification Challenge series, I used a lot of what would be considered archaic firearms, going all the way back to Smith & Wesson Model 10s and Walther P38s, and a lot of others that were very old designs, and I was using them in what, at least at that time, were current law enforcement qualification courses, and I didn't have any problem qualifying with any of those old design firearms that I was using in those qualifications. But as I said, this is something that seems to cause a lot of debate and consternation and arguments, sometimes heated arguments, among folks who have an interest in defensive firearms. So I thought I would bring this back. I'm going to try it in this video to see how it goes. For those of you who watch this, let me know what you think of it, and let me know if you want to see more videos along these lines, or if you just think this topic has been beaten to death and you don't think there's any more that needs to be talked about. Anyway, let me tell you about what I'm going to be comparing in this video. For my older firearm design, I'm going to be using the Inglis P35 high-power pistol. Now, obviously, this is a newer rendition of the P35 design, but the high power is celebrating its 90th birthday this year in 2025, so this design goes all the way back to 1935 when it was first issued by FN. And there are a couple of modern flares that are added to this particular pistol, but at its heart, it is still the same basic P35 Browning pistol that was manufactured all those years ago. I think the P35 makes a pretty good candidate for this topic because while there are a lot of fans of these handguns, there are also some people who don't like them. And I think part of the reason is it has some idiosyncrasies that require the shooter to spend some time learning the handgun, making sure they are shooting it properly and that they are not doing anything that is going to induce a malfunction. And I think that might be part of the problem, particularly with newer designs that come out, as more and more new designs come out with all kinds of different features to configure them to the individual shooter. I think a lot, particularly of new shooters, expect that a firearm, a given firearm, is going to be more or less manufactured specifically for them, and essentially the firearm is going to be made to adapt to however they want to shoot it. Whereas not all that long ago, firearms were designed to accommodate the majority of shooters of average stature and average skill, etc. And for anyone who didn't quite interface, I'll use that word, with the firearm correctly, they were expected to adapt to that firearm. The firearm was not going to be adapted to them. As I said, that has changed over the years, and that could be a generational shift, or maybe it's just a paradigm shift in firearms design that has taken place over the last several decades. Probably one of the greatest examples of that has to do with left-handed shooters. Ambidexterity is a concept that really has only become widespread in maybe the last 20 years or so. Now, prior to that, there were a few left-hand specific firearms that were manufactured, but overall, not that many of them. And again, the P35 makes a pretty good example for this. Now, this specific one does have an ambidextrous safety, but other than that, there's no ambidextrous slide release, there's no ambidextrous mag release, there's no nothing like that. And I think this is probably also one of the things that we can point to where engineering changes have helped, because for left-handed shooters, now again, back in the day, they were just expected to adapt their shooting style to the right-hand designed firearm, but now at least they can have something that works a little bit better for them. Representing the new handgun designs is what I think is the most advanced handgun in my collection. What I have here is my Canik SFX Rival Dark Side, and this thing has all kinds of configurability and reconfigurability engineered into it. It's got interchangeable back straps, it's got ambidextrous everything. The magazine release can be made either longer or shorter, so it's exactly where the shooter wants it for his or her thumb. It is optics compatible, and you can see that I have an optic mounted here. This is a Holosun, and this particular optic has a multi-reticle system, so I can even choose whatever reticle is going to be best for whatever type of shooting I'm doing on a given day. So you don't get much more adaptable than this handgun when it comes to making it appropriate for a particular shooter, shooting it in a particular way. It is obviously the modern polymer frame striker fire design, and I really like this pistol. It's interesting though that this particular one is 3 years or so old, and Canik has since come out with some even newer versions of this pistol that have even more bells and whistles. So maybe I'll have to do a new versus old with this Rival Dark Side and one of the newer ones at some point. And in fact, I think I actually did that with one of the metal versions of this pistol. Anyway, what I'm going to be doing is going out to the range, and I've got the video clips I'll be showing you from the range, and I'm shooting both of these handguns side by side through some of my defensive drills. And if you've seen very many of my handgun reviews, these drills are going to look familiar to you. I'm not going through every single drill that I shoot in every single handgun review because I don't think I need to. I'm going to be concentrating on a little bit more of the close-in defensive style drills. I'm going to be using my shot timer to initiate the shooting sequence. So we'll be able to take a look at how long it takes to present the firearm, how long it takes to acquire a proper sight picture, and of course how long it takes to squeeze off whatever number of shots are required in that drill. We can also look at the accuracy that I'm able to achieve with both the Rival Dark Side and the P35 High Power. And at the end of the video, we can talk about whether or not we're seeing a lot of improved performance with the newer high-speed design, or if over the last 90 years of handgun development, there's just not that much difference between what we're seeing with the older handgun and the newer handgun. So let's jump right into it and find out. The first defensive drill is going to be controlled pairs from a distance of 5 yards. And when we get to the range, I'm going to be shooting both of these handguns with the exact same 9mm ammunition. I'm going to be presenting them both from a holster. I have to use different holsters because they won't both fit in the same holster, but neither holster has a retention device, so there's nothing to impede my presentation. Now, when I am presenting the P35, I am starting with it cocked and locked. So as I'm removing it from the holster and bringing it to bear on the target, I do have to disengage the thumb safety and then squeeze off my shots. When I complete that drill, I will re-engage the safety before I put it back in the holster. So let's see how it went. Now let's break down those controlled pairs a little bit. The high power ended up with 5 out of the 6 shots on the heart of the target and 1 shot in the target's right lung. Overall, I think that was very good defensive accuracy. The average time from the signal to fire until I had fired out both shots in that drill was 2.52 seconds, so about 2.5 seconds from the signal until I had drawn and fired out both shots. For the Rival Dark Side, I ended up with a very nice tight cluster of 6 shots right dead center in the heart. The difference in time was really not much. It was a difference in average times of 0.14 seconds. So 14/100ths of a difference in average time to fire out both shots in favor of the Rival Dark Side as opposed to the P35 high power. But that's 14/100ths of a second. I'm going to show you here a split screen, and the difference in these two is going to be in favor of the Rival Dark Side, but I couldn't find an exact 0.14/100ths of a second difference. So what this is going to be is 11/100ths of a second, so just slightly less difference than the average, but here's what it looked like. When I watch that, I really think if the SFX Rival me and the P35 High Power me are in a shootout and there's a 0.14 second difference in the time it takes both me's to fire off those shots, probably both me's will simultaneously win and lose that conflict. The reason I say that is because I don't think 0.14 seconds, absent a central nervous system hit, is long enough for the bullet to make contact and for one me or the other to react to it. So I think both people in that type of a situation are going to fire out both of their shots, and they're probably, as I said, both going to win and both going to lose, assuming the shot placement is what we saw in the video. Now, it's important to keep in mind that I'm talking about defensive scenarios. If we're talking about a competition setting, then yeah, 14/100ths of a second could make a difference between somebody winning a competition and not winning a competition. I get that. But when we're looking at a defensive scenario, I just don't think there's that much difference there. And when we consider all of the bells and whistles that go in favor of the SFX Rival, the fact that the P35 did that well and is that close to the performance of the Rival Dark Side, really I would say suggests that the P35 acquitted itself quite well in that drill. Time for the next drill. This is going to be failure drills from a distance of 7 yards. This is 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head in rapid succession to simulate a situation where the 2 shots to the body did not stop a hostile aggressor and the 3rd shot to the head was necessary in order to end that imminent lethal threat. Let's go back to the range and see how things went. Now let's break down the results of those failure drills. Once again, the P-35 had 3 of the forward body shots on the heart of the target. 1 of the body shots was off in the right lung. Again, pretty decent defensive accuracy. I had 1 really good headshot with the P-35 and 1 that was a little off, but it might not have instantly turned the lights out for a bad guy, but I think it would probably have been a good enough shot that he would have lost interest in wanting to continue to fight. The average time for both of those failure drills with the P-35 was 3.1 seconds. Now keep that in mind because we're going to come back to it momentarily. For the Rival Dark Side, again, all 4 shots fired at the body were in the heart of the target, and I had 2 really good headshots. Now I've said before, the Canik Rival really is my most accurate 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and it is demonstrating it in these drills today. But once again, it has essentially a century's worth of engineering advancements to its benefit as opposed to what we're getting with the P-35. But even so, the average time for both of those failure drills with the Canik Rival was 1/10 of a second slower than the P-35 high power. So I was actually shooting just a little bit faster with the P-35, and maybe if I'd slowed down just a tick, that second headshot might have been a little bit better than it was. But I've got a pretty close comparison here that I can show you. This is going to be the second failure drill with both pistols, and in this one, the Canik Rival Dark Side was faster by 8/100ths of a second. So this is pretty close to the 1/10 second difference on average between these two. Here's about what a 1/10 of a second difference looks like. So once again, absent a central nervous system hit, I don't think there's enough difference in time there for one or the other to really have an advantage when it comes to getting shots on target first. But as I said, the accuracy was a little bit better that time around with the Canik Rival Dark Side than it was with the P-35. For my last drill, I backed off to a distance of 15 yards. Now, I always get people yelling at me in the comments talking about how there's no way you'd ever be able to justify firing shots from a distance of 15 yards or 25 yards or whatever and claim that it was self-defense. And the thing that I think people don't consider is you might not be shooting at that distance to defend yourself. Think active threat incident, where someone is randomly harming, murdering other people, and you're there and you're armed and you can stop it? Are you going to say, well, I'm 15 yards away, I don't think I can justify stopping the axe murderer over there, so I guess I'll go get myself some coffee? I'm not. Or imagine maybe it's not even a human being. Maybe a child is in a backyard being attacked by a vicious animal or something like that, and you're 15 yards away or 20 yards away. Do you want your marksmanship skills to be so inadequate that you couldn't potentially defend that child? I don't. So I do practice from extended distances, which is why in this video I'm going back to a distance of 15 yards. From that distance I'm firing 3 shots with each handgun, and here's how it went. From 15 yards, I think the defensive accuracy with both handguns was more than acceptable. I had 2 shots right in the top of the heart with the P-35, and one of them that was just off, still going to be in a very vital area for our bad guy. With the Rival Dark Side, I had 1 shot in each lung and 1 through the heart. So I think it's really a draw when it comes to defensive accuracy with either handgun in that particular drill. When we look at the times, the Rival Dark Side was faster by 0.36 seconds. Now we're a little over a third of a second there, so we are seeing a little bit of significant advantage for the Rival Dark Side, but I think a lot of that advantage had more to do with the optic on this pistol than it had to do with anything about the pistol itself. When I was presenting the firearm, it was faster to acquire my target with the optic, and coming out of recoil, it was faster to reacquire my target than it was with the iron sights on the P35. Even so, I still think the accuracy was good, and I really am not too upset about that time that it took to fire out 3 shots with the P35, and particularly maintaining that accuracy. There is a huge emphasis on shooting fast nowadays, and everyone thinks you're going to have to quick draw and crank off a magazine as fast as you possibly can. And really that just equates to spraying and praying. There's no two ways about it. Maybe you're going to hit the target, maybe you're not, maybe you're going to miss, and the bullet's going to travel all the way to the school playground that's 2 blocks down the street or something like that. So accuracy always has to be, at least in my mind, the first consideration when you're shooting. And you might have to take a little bit longer to fire an accurate shot. That might mean that the other person who's spraying and praying might get a bullet to you faster. This is a big part of the reason you don't want to get into a gunfight in the first place. They're dangerous. But I don't want to be the one that puts the bullet in the school playground. I want to make sure I'm putting the bullet in the bad guy. Let's talk a little bit about these results and whether or not they tell us anything significant about the advancements in the Rival Dark Side pistol after all these years over and above the classic P35 design. Here's a final look at the target after all the drills were completed. The dark blue stickers are the shots from the P35. The red stickers are the shots from the Rival Dark Side. Obviously, the Canik Rival was a little bit more accurate throughout all the drills than the P35, but I think the P35 gave a pretty good showing of itself. And as I said before, the big advantage that I get with the Rival Dark Side is this optic. And I don't really want to downplay that though. The reason that I have been working more and more with optics in recent years than with iron sights alone is because my eyesight is not quite what it once was. As I look at these sights, they're a little bit blurry and I'm not able to maintain the level of accuracy that I historically could as quickly with this type of a sighting system as I can nowadays with an optic equipped handgun. So for me and for a lot of other people, the advancements in this handgun do offer a significant advantage when it comes to shooting either defensively or just on the range for target practice or whatever I'm doing. That said, that doesn't mean particularly someone with younger eyes couldn't use the P35 every bit as effectively as I can the optic equipped Rival Dark Side. And something else I should probably mention is in these drills that you just saw, this was the first time that I've shot the P35 in months. In fact, I might not have shot this pistol since I conducted the review, which was probably now 8 or 9 months ago. Now, in all honesty, I haven't shot the Rival Dark Side a lot lately either, but I shoot poly-framed, optic-equipped handguns like this all the time. In fact, over the last several weeks, I've been shooting them 3 or 4 times a week, every week. So it's not too much of a change for me to pick up the Rival Dark Side. And since it is such a good shooting pistol to begin with, I'm able to apply the things that I use with those other poly striker pistols that had the optic on top when I'm shooting this one. It's a natural transition, whereas it takes a little bit more work to get back into the swing of things with the P35. Now, I did fire a couple of drills for practice before I started to shoot these on camera with the P35 to try to reacclimate myself to it a little bit. But if I had been shooting this pistol as much in the last several weeks as I've been shooting the poly striker pistols, there's every possibility that I would have shot this better and faster than I did the Dark Side because the times and the accuracy were so close as it was. But in order to achieve that, I would have had to use my reading glasses when shooting the P35 as opposed to using just the shooting glasses when I was shooting the Rival Dark Side. So let me know what you think. Do you think there was a significant advantage one way or the other? Do you think the P35 held its own? Do you think the Rival Dark Side just totally dominated this? And let me know if you want to see more videos like this in the future. I can do a lot of other new versus old. I could do something like, say, the traditional HK MP5 design versus the X-Tar EP9. That might be fun. And I could do some other ones as well, so let me know. But for now, that's going to do it for today. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.